folks. Welcome to an all-new So Bad It's Good. This is your pal Ryan, and I'm doing this on a Sunday morning, close to afternoon, so hopefully you'll hear this at some point on Sunday. This is our third part covering the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, It Ends With Us debacle. In the first two parts, we covered the initial New York Times article, and we then covered the 80-page legal document that Blake Lively filed. Now, in this one, we're going to talk a little bit about the information that has come out since. We're going to be using sources. One, Matt Baldoni, who wrote an amazing piece for Puck. I had to sign up for like a 14-day free trial just to read this article, but it was well worth it. Matthew Baldoni is just an amazing writer that I've been following for years. So I was very pleased when I read this, and there was so much more information given. We'll read an article from the LA Times together. Consider this just learning to read together. We're doing an LA Times article. And then I was sent this fabulous thread. I want to give credit to anybody I use here. Her name is @LittleMissJacob on X, or Twitter, as I like to call it, which goes through a lot of things as well. I'll also be reading a couple of comments from YouTube. Now, you're probably listening to this, but you might be watching it on YouTube. I think in the new year, we're going to start putting video up on Spotify, because I know a lot of people are enjoying their podcast this way. Remember when podcasts were literally just audio, the good old days? And now I look like the creature from the Black Lagoon. I don't want to be on video, but I know a lot of people are consuming that way. So we're going to do all of that. We're going to look at some social media posts of people that are coming out in support of Blake Lively, cast members from It Ends With Us, former cast members of Blake Lively. So everybody seems to be rallying around. Do we have a Taylor Swift post yet? She's out and about in New York having dates with Travis Kelce, wearing $33,000 earrings. Can we get a Blake Lively post from Taylor Swift, since Taylor Swift's name was brought up a couple of times in all of these communications that we have read? Now, remember, what's interesting about this is that the first two parts, I think Blake Lively and her lawyers and team have put together a very solid case. But remember, they're telling a story, right? They're telling a story, and that story is really damning. But there will be a reaction. For every action, there is a reaction. And so we will also be talking about an article released in our favorite, the Daily Mail, who has come up a lot in these episodes, that are already talking about the legal filing that Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios will be making. And Brian Friedman, shout out Brian Friedman, I love you, don't sue me. Justin and Wayfarer's lawyers says they're coming out swinging. So we'll read that article as well to kind of see but I mean, this thing is going to keep exploding, but it's really now this game of what you can put in the media and what you can keep out of the media. And if you've listened to the first two parts, you see that the crisis PR firm and Justin's own PR agent, which there's a whole story there, which we're going to get into, of how they got the text messages and email exchanges in the first place. How was Blake Lively able to get her hands on this? Well, we have an answer for that as well. And that's why this really interesting spider web, this honeycomb of just insane little pockets that all kind of piece together. And I think it gives you a fairly accurate representation of how PR works, how Hollywood works, and how the general world at large kind of works. If you think about it on a smaller scale, I was kind of postulating this with you guys the first two episodes of, we do this in our everyday lives of trying to bury people. Just think of it like the high school lunch break and spreading rumors and putting out little pieces of information. And then if you put out little pieces of information and then you can cherry pick little pieces where Blake Lively looked like an asshole during interviews for other films. And you have all of a sudden this case against Blake Lively. But now Blake Lively is able to do it to Justin Baldoni. And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, she's cherry picking these text messages and these emails, and it's not the full thought. You've got to remember context. And like I said in the first two parts, sometimes we are not sensitive enough in looking at something 360 because we want something to be right and we want something to be wrong. We want it black or white, and we really have a hard trouble with that gray area. Now, just reading these as a layman, I am not a lawyer. I want to put that out right now. I think you guys probably understood that listening to the first two parts. But I am your average consumer and somebody that has followed this stuff since I was a little kid. And while I find the allegations and the things that Justin Baldoni, the things that he did, I found them really reprehensible when you read them all together, right? They are really reprehensible. And especially after Blake Lively said, hey, if I'm going to come back to work after the Writers Guild strike, we need to put these conditions in place. We can't be improvising nude scenes, kissing scenes. It all makes me feel uncomfortable. Her husband, Ryan Reynolds, was getting involved. You know, those things you need to put in place to have a safe, productive film set. I mean, you need that in any kind of corporate job. And remember, Sony is the distributor of this. That's a big corporation. And reminder that Justin Baldoni, according to these papers, had multiple HR suits filed against him and Wayfarer Studios and the producer Jamie Heath. So it wasn't just Blake Lively. Now, of course, more information is going to come out about that as well, but it was all this game, and it still is this game. Like, I was doing a search on Google right now and just typed in Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, and I was looking at all the articles that came out in the last day, LA Times being one of them. And there's a part of us that want to believe that the LA Times, you know, this is their Woodward and Bernstein, you know, this is their Deep Throat, you know, like, let's get the Watergate scandals going. And you want to believe that they did this of their own accord. There's some roving reporter saying, I need to get to the heart of that story. And sometimes that is the case. But a lot of the times it's in conjunction with PR people. It's in conjunction with studios and people like, hey, pay attention over here. Or can you write an article about this? And that is the way this industry seems to work. I will say, and by the way, I see so much misinformation on social media from, you know, I mean, you go on TikTok, right? Which I love to do. And TikTok really is, I feel like those are the roving reporters from the 70s. They're on TikTok now. It's just that they don't really understand journalistic standards. And so they put out a lot of misinformation. They misread a lot of things. I mean, I was watching one TikTok last night and the lady didn't even get Justin's first name right. And I was like, well, that's not a good start. It's not a great start. So there's a lot of things out there that you kind of have to, So that's why I'm trying to use articles and things with sourced information. But I'm sure there are details in this that will be proven. Maybe, you know, we're going to get a fuller picture. And I keep thinking, and this is something that we'll think about at the end of this episode as well, is if this keeps going, you've damaged Blake Lively's reputation, and in the lawsuit or in the legal filing, you know, they proved that it really hurt Blake's liquor sales. It hurt her hair care products. You know, it hurt her reputation. And I got to tell you, I believe that to be 100% true. But people are like, well, she's buried herself by this, this, and this. Yes, but like I said, because these people are bringing those instances to the forefront and they're creating a tsunami of cancellation vibes. But Justin's going to fire back at Blake Lively. That's going to add another thing. Then Blake Lively will fire back at Justin Baldoni. And at the end of the day, you have like made reputational harm to both of these people. And so it'll be really interesting to see what susses out from this. It'll be interesting to see how PR people go forward with this. But like I said, just doing a simple Google search, you already see the PR people are out there working hard still. And I guess one of my questions also is PR, you know, you're hired PR to get your message out, right? To get your show out or what you're selling or your wares. I mean, part of the reason I went to Betches was I was like, okay, they'll be able to get my show out to more people. It'll be more visible in certain ways. I'm just me. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not a star. And so when you realize that, you're like, well, I feel like I'm doing a decent show. I want people to hear it. I want people to be aware of this show, right? And so you try to make moves that will make you more visible. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but when I do think it's a bad thing is when you are plotting against somebody else. When you are plotting, when a group of people are plotting. And in this case, money was involved. So you are paying for this service. And the service is to make Justin Baldoni look good. But then part of that service was to purposely make Blake Lively look bad, to highlight, to amplify bad stories about Blake Lively. And you can use that argument of they're just doing their job. But it's a real dirty job. And there's a lot of dirty jobs out there in Hollywood and elsewhere. I think we all know that. Okay, a couple of announcements before we start getting into the meat of all this. Thank you for being here. Man, I've gotten so much positive feedback in the last day where I was like, wait, is this about me? Like, people are liking these? I kind of didn't know if anybody would really care at this point, even though it's only been a week. And I primarily focus on Bravo and pop culture. And I think this falls firmly in the pop culture camp, and it's something that truly fascinated me. So I was putting these out just for myself, to walk this through in my head, because as always, when you think about something in your head, sometimes you get so many things wrong. So it's really important to talk things out. That's why I recommend therapy. Shout out to Shep Rose, not an ayahuasca journey, which, by the way, what I keep thinking about, you guys, is that one part in the legal filing from Blake, that one of the rules coming back to film was Justin Baldoni can no longer talk about conversations he's had with Blake Lively's dead father. There's a lot of disgusting accusations against Justin Baldoni, but for one, that one has stuck with me. That one is weird and creepy, and I'm so curious how they will answer that. But that's just a big, tall order. Now, if you're going to, like, I enjoy psychics and people that work in the beyond realm. And a lot of people, like, if I had that kind of like psychic money just to throw around, I would love to try to be in touch with my mom. I would love to be in touch with my grandma. I would love to see, I love to believe in an afterlife and spirituality and stuff like that. But for a working relationship that these people, Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively, didn't have a former relationship, that's way too personal. You know, like, if you're in a deep conversation and Blake Lively's like, you know what, Justin, I heard you had a power to talk to the realm of the beyond, and is there any way you could reach out to my dead father as he tried to communicate? Like, if she gave that kind of, it's all about consent, then it would be different. But if Justin Baldoni's coming up to her and like, hey, guess what? Your dead dad, talk to him. He wants you to do the nude scene, which, by the way, that's not what the dead we'll probably find out more about that. But you know what I'm saying? It's so creepy and so off-putting. And Justin, if you have that gift, maybe get out of movies and just stick to that lane, because that's fascinating. So you'll always have work somewhere, because it seems like you're going to have a tough road ahead of you, potentially, with all of this. But you never know. Like I said, I was already reading negative comments about Blake Lively still, and saying, oh, God, this is ridiculous. Oh, she's ridiculous. And we'll talk about that as well. So it's not all cut and dry. And remember, they just told a story in this legal filing. They told a story. They really painted this picture. But there will be an answer to that picture. So they did their job in really getting us, like, fired up, really painting a case. But now you're going to have the other side of that case in the next week or two. I hope it's past when I've recovered from my sinus surgery, which, by the way, I also put that I was doing the sinus surgery on this show and in my Instagram yesterday. And I talked about this, how somebody said, don't do it, cancel it. My brother-in-law died on the table. And I was like, oh my God. And I legitimately got scared. I posted that on Instagram. I got so many messages of people like, I did the surgery. It's going to be fine. You just have like 3 or 4 really painful days, and that's it. But hopefully we'll be all good. I go in at 9 a.m. tomorrow, Pacific Standard Time. So pour one out for me. You know, by the way, hey, if these are my last podcasts, going out with a bang, right? Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, great stuff. If you like this show, or if you're new to this show, welcome. The water's fine. Come on in. We won't hurt you. Consider leaving it a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We're also on YouTube. Shout out to Maritza Lopez and Sandra Fryer. Maritza makes all the images and uploads YouTube, and Sandra just manages Patreon and will help with guests, and they're just both great people. So thank you to them. And also shout out to my Patreon, my baddies, patreon.com/SoBadIt'sGood. After I did these 2 parts, I was a little Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively'd out yesterday, but I managed to do a nearly 2-hour Patreon episode where we talked about a lot of like stuff I'm watching right now, but also did like an hour and a half or hour 15 recap. We're going through Vanderpump Rules season 2. We're up to episode 4. And the show is just so magnetic because they are just so toxic with each other. And that's 2013. We were in 2024, and I think one could argue that they are still just as toxic. But if you like old Vanderpump Rules like I do, go on over to the Patreon. But remember, there's like 400 plus episodes that have never made the main feed over on Patreon. So I want to remind people I'll be releasing new episodes on Monday and Tuesday, which I have to finish today. And then probably for the rest of the week, I will be out. Remember, there is no new Bravo this week, but there is so many great podcasts out there, so many great podcasters. I wanted to say I was on Gibson John's podcast, Gabbing with Gib. We recorded that like a week and a half ago, and he released it this week, but it's like the year in Bravo, Bravo Insanity. And I thought that was a really fun podcast. But catch up on old episodes. We have like 1,000 episodes plus on the main feed. So just pick and choose. But there are so many great podcasters and podcasts out there that you will not be alone if you need somebody. But I would appreciate if you come back to this show at some point, hopefully in a week when I'm back. But yeah, I know me. I'm just scared I'm going to be like, no, I need to work. So I just need to remember to rest and get through it. Also, there will be a timestamp. So if you're tired of hearing this part of me just talking about my real life, I totally get it. I get that can be annoying for some people. There was one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, this is it. Man, because of these episodes, I think I finally hit the top 10 in TV and film podcasts. And I know that this is not meant to be braggadocious or a humble brag or anything. I just want to say how proud I am to have that happen. And I know it's the end of the year and a lot of people are listening to podcasts, so there's probably various reasons why I hit top 10. But there are so few things that you can like kind of quantify if things are going well in podcasting. And for me, I always, I try to not look at charts, but I still will sneak a look every week. And the highest we've gotten is 13. And we finally hit 10. And that was a goal for 2024 that I just thought we would not do it. And we did it right under the wire. That's me getting your goals done right at the very last minute, cramming for that final at the very end. But we made it. We got there. Hopefully we'll get there again in 2025 with your help. But if not, we made it once. We made it one time. So that was really fucking nice. Really fucking nice. It made me feel so good. And I hope, I think, I don't know where I said this lately. I mean, I think I said on the Patreon is that I think it's, somebody said, oh yeah, you're not nihilistic. Because I was talking about doing the Jeff Lewis live show and how much it meant to me and how much work and thought I had put into certain things. And I said, it's okay to admit when you care about something. I think it's so like chic to say like, I just don't care. I care deeply, man. I care so deeply. I put so much work into this. And I've tried to learn to be chill, which is hard for me. I've tried, I try to meditate. I try to do all of these things, but this stuff means the world to me. It really does. And I think it's okay to say that. And I think for you as the listener, I would think maybe part of the reason you listen is because I care. I care about these things. I feel these things deeply. And I do truly want to try to get to some sort of truth, not just for an understanding of these situations, but for a better understanding of myself, for a better understanding of all of us. You can learn like little lessons in talking about these things and see your own failures and see where you can improve or your own successes. You can do all of this through watching reality TV, through talking about pop culture. And it's really interesting. That's why this story fascinates me so much, because it's a peek behind the curtain that we all know is there, that we all suspect is there, but we get to see the machinations. We get to see the inner workings of it. And so this is just a gigantic opportunity for us to learn about how all of this works. And then at the end of the day, to try to be able to trust your own motor, trust your own instincts. When we read something, we usually get a gut feeling if something's true or not. But if you see it again and again and again and again, if it's like carpet bombed, if it's astroturfing, then you're like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, but always follow your instincts. And always be, I don't mean conspiratorial, but always have a healthy dose of suspicion. Happy New Year. Goodbye, guys. No, but always have that, Question where you're reading it, why you're reading it, who you're reading it about, what you know to be true. Question those things. I think that's healthy to question those things. Okay, that's it. Let's begin. Let's get into this thing. Finally, 20 minutes in. Are you, by the way, I didn't get asked. Are you guys doing good? I know new people to the show don't know, but I always like to check in because I think I know who I'm talking to. I can really picture who I'm talking to, and I hope you're doing okay. And if you're not doing okay, that's okay too, because tomorrow's going to be a new day, and then a couple days it's going to be a new year, and we got a clean slate, baby. We're going to be able to like just start again. And I know 2025, there's a lot of scary things already in our path. I understand. But remember, if we're here talking, that means that's good. That's community. That's something we can rely on when times are tough. When I was growing up, I used to be a huge Howard Stern listener. And it wasn't, I have to defend Howard Stern a lot of the times because people are like, oh, the sex guy. I wasn't into it for like his interviews with porn stars or something. What I loved was that he would make his entire crew part of the show. It was like a reality show. He would yell at Gary, his producer, Baba Booey. He had Robyn, his main sidekick. He had Fred doing the sound effects. Sal and Richard were these goofballs that worked in the office. You had this Jason Kaplan, John Hine. You had this cast of characters. And when I was growing up, and I remember going to Chicago once to work at a bunch of different theaters for a summer, and I was with my best friend Dusty. And he didn't have cable. He didn't have it. It was like before, like, and we had internet, but it was like before it wasn't like it is today. And I remember I would wake up at 6 a.m. in Chicago just to listen to Howard Stern because I didn't really know anybody out in Chicago except for my best friend who had a full-time job. And I would listen there, and I would even kind of sleep throughout the episode just because I wanted to listen to what I considered my friends. I considered them family because I had listened to them for so many years. And the funny thing is, I don't get to really keep up with Stern as much as I used to. I got to listen to him a little bit over the break on the drive to Arizona. And it's great because you can always like hop in and kind of know where you're at. It's like family. And you're like, okay, you feel like you're a part of it. And I just want to assure you, you are a part of this if that's something that you need. You can be a casual listener and be a part of this. You can be a daily listener and be a part of this. But it was always one of those things that I loved, that he brought these people in, these characters. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Jeff Lewis Sirius show that I get to be a part of is, he makes all of these people, they're characters, like these people that are in his life, he brings on the show. And, you start to know, you're like, oh, there's Jameson, or there's Doug Buden, or Monica Casey, or Mercedes Javid, or Jamie Kennedy, or any of the chumps. And it's kind of nice because even when I'm not on the show now, I listen to Jeff's show and I get caught up in it. I mean, it's exactly as a radio fan, you get caught up in those things and you feel like you're a part of something. And by the way, to all the chumps listening, first off, thank you for being here. What up, chumps? That's what we call us, the Jeff Lewis listeners. I know Jeff's been talking about some sort of virus on his show. One of the chumps is a virus. I'm pretty sure it's not me. I think I can tell you it's not me. And I will say I was asked to be on the show this next week, but I couldn't do it because of the surgery. But I've had a lot of people reach out to say, is Jeff mad at you? No, I don't believe so. I was just there on Thursday. Everything was great. I had a blast of a show. So I've been getting that question a lot. So I just figured I would mention it in this third part that I think we're good. But if you never see me on Jeff Lewis again, then I guess I am the virus. But I know I'm not. Okay, that's it. Here we go. Okay, where do we start in this anatomy of a scandal, as we'll call it? Also, somebody from Australia messaged me, and this period of time that I've been talking about, the week right before Christmas and the week before Christmas and New Year's, how we're all in this kind of phantom zone of like, what day is it? What time is it? They call it, over in Australia, they call it Gooch Week. Gooch. I love that. Gooch Week. We are in the Gooch Week, so celebrate the Gooch with us. Okay. So we are going to start with one of my favorite entertainment reporters. This is a great article written by Matthew Baldoni. It is in puck.news. Just like I said, I signed up for a 14-day subscription that I will tell you now I will forget to cancel. So I will be paying $9.99 a month. Probably for the next year because I will continue to forget. We're going to start with a person being talked about that has not been part of the first two parts yet, but plays a very important role. The headline of this article is Hollywood's Villains of the Year are the It Ends With Us Publicists. Really strong headline. The villains are the publicists. And the subhead says, Blake Lively's legal complaint against co-star Justin Baldoni and his team of operators exposes the sinister subset of the crisis communications industry that seeks to attack and misinform even as Lively's own tactics and the role of notorious publicist Stephanie Jones come further into focus. Stephanie, if you're listening, huge fan, leave me alone. So the article starts, among the many ways that the internet has destroyed traditional Hollywood, what used to constitute public relations doesn't really work anymore, like we've said. The notion of a celebrity persona crafted solely via occasional media appearances seems about as quaint and outdated as a black and white movie or a print magazine. What matters now in many circles is the conversation, the constant churn of a carefully curated digital profile, media hits, social chatter and comments, video clips, and searchable content, both seeded and unseeded, that together comprise an evolving perception of a public person. So that is so interesting just to break. We're going to break this down like Shakespeare, folks. This is so fascinating because think about it. Back in the day when we were growing up, well, unless you're a youngin', congrats. Back in the day, you would have, these press tours for movies and you would hit like Entertainment Tonight, Access Hollywood, E! News. But we didn't have the 24/7 media, like entertainment media cycle. We were starting to have the 24/7 news cycle now for decades, but for the media, the entertainment news, that became a new thing because of social media, where you really could now delicately craft a public persona. Timothée Chalamet is doing it beautifully right now. Timothée Chalamet out there for Bob Dylan's the Complete Unknown movie. He is out there doing podcast interviews with influencers, Theo Vaughn, Brittany Broski, Nardwar, people that you might not know those three names that I've spoke of, but they really have a lot of pull, and especially with a certain age demographic. And he's out there just being able to be Timothée Chalamet, and he seems like a really cool guy. So it's not necessarily crafted, but they're putting it in the right way. And then what people are doing with that is they're clipping those interviews, and you see them pop up all over TikTok. So even if you don't listen to the podcast Theo Vaughn, you're going to see clips somewhere. It's really great. And the world seems to really love Timothée Chalamet at this point. We are in no scandals with Timothée Chalamet, except for what I brought up with, if you're a little curious about his relationship with Kylie Jenner, which he has managed to keep out of the news cycle. You know that nobody, I would bet the talking points on any PR rep for Timothée Chalamet says no go on any relationship questions about Kylie Jenner. That's the only stipulation I believe Timothée Chalamet probably has at this point. Because he's still, he's been around for a decade, but he's still young in his career. But think about a time when Tom Cruise was a big movie star. Now think about this. Tom Cruise was the golden boy for so long, right? Just one of the last movie stars. I mean, true, I would still say one of the last movie stars that we have. Movie stars in the sense that we still went to movies every weekend and the box office was robust and it was more than just Marvel movies. But then, this is not in the article, you guys, this is just me talking. Then there was a PR campaign for War of the Worlds, the Steven Spielberg alien film. Shout out to the drones and Bethany Frankel right now, New Jersey drones, what up? So this War of the Worlds PR campaign started. And it was wild because Tom Cruise started getting a little too confident and cocky in his power. And all of these questions about Scientology started coming up. And if you remember, he had a very tenacious interview with Matt Lauer, who is no longer with NBC News for a lot of reasons, gross reasons. But they kind of sparred a little bit where Tom Cruise is like, you're being glib, Matt, you're being glib. Because they were starting to ask about Scientology, and they were asking about how one of the Scientologists' core beliefs is that psychiatry can kill you, that these medicines that kids are on, that I'm on antidepressants, that these are not, so Tom Cruise was speaking of these things that were like, whoa, I thought you were just a movie star. Like, this is wild. And we had the Katie Holmes debacle and him going on Oprah and jumping on the couch and all of this insanity. And by the way, that was huge at the time. You know, that was when Us Weekly was a print magazine and it made the covers and it was all, but we didn't have TikTok then. We didn't have social media in the way we have it today. And Tom Cruise was destroyed at the time, but he would have been toast if TikTok had been around during that period of time. And it really sent him into a spiral, which he did not truly recover from until like later Mission Impossible movies. And then, of course, he kind of became the savior of movies when Top Gun Maverick came out during the pandemic and brought people back to the theaters. But, you know, he was out there still making movies, still an international movie star. But in America, his image had been really beat up on. And a lot of that was attributed to Scientology. They found out all these videos. They found him at Scientology award ceremonies going like, hey, you know, speaking to Scientologists, stuff that we're not able to see, going like, hey, we know if we see somebody on the side of the road in an accident, we know that we're the only ones that can save them. Like, you know, just real kind of made sense to all the Scientologists in the room for us bystanders watching this going like, what the fuck? You guys have superhuman powers? What's going on? Xenu what? But up until that point, Tom Cruise was revered. He was even able to get out of the Nicole Kidman marriage unscathed for the most part. But I just keep thinking back to a yesteryear and what this first paragraph of Matt Baldoni's article says is that the way movies and TV used to be promoted is now considered quaint. Today, promoting any of these things, it's Thunderdome. It's Thunderdome. It is a fucking constant battle. Continuing the article, the old PR system obviously had its flaws, but it has been replaced by essentially guerrilla warfare, a 24/7 battle for attention, impressions, and sentiment. That's an important word, sentiment. All of it subject to manipulation and in moments of crisis or vulnerability, outright implosion. The new expanded battlefield has also empowered some of the world's worst people, trained in the dark arts of media machinations and less constrained by the guardrails of traditional journalists and other gatekeepers. They call themselves crisis communication experts or reputation management consultants, but they are really a subset of those people, political operatives trained to attack, obfuscate. I was doing good up to this point. What if the next hour is me just trying to pronounce obfuscate? Obfuscate? Fuck. You know, 2025, I'll learn. OBFUSCAT. I know what I'm trying to. Anyways, misinform, flood the zone, and if necessary, to destroy for a price. This is all great information, but I also just want to as a geek of this shit, this Matthew Baldoni, what a beautifully written paragraph that gets you so, just like the words, media machinations, guardrails, gatekeepers, the dark arts, just beautiful writing. Continuing, at the same time, film and television stardom is much more ephemeral, both financially and culturally, than it used to be. The celebrity industrial complex pot of gold can now generally be found at the end of the personal brand rainbow via the leveraging of those amorphous qualities, public persona, goodwill, aspiration, and for some, talent. Isn't that amazing? So he's talking about the rise of influencers. That, you know, at the very last thing that is considered nowadays is talent. It's all the other things. Oh, how do we feel about the person? What's their brand? What are they selling? What are they doing? Are they talking directly to me? It continues, commoditization. Wait. Oh, sorry, guys. One sec. Sorry, my mic freaked out on me. Commoditization has always been a mostly beneficial byproduct of celebrity, but now the cultivation of a personal brand is what matters above all else. It creates value amid the noise, when managed particularly well, can turn average celebrities like Kylie Jenner and Selena Gomez and Ryan Reynolds into billionaires. All three of them billionaires, not just because of their movies, but because of their products, their persona. It's much deeper. This is all a long way of explaining why the wars of perception being waged online matter so much, or why astroturfing, flooding the web with content that appears to be organically produced but is actually part of a paid campaign to push an agenda, often to smear someone or fire back against an attempted smearing, is now a service that certain PR firms casually offer on their menu, like a side of fries with a double-double. And it's why the battle behind the scenes and now completely engulfing the summer hit movie It Ends With Us has become the saddest, nastiest, and unfortunately most cutting-edge public relations war of 2024. So this is like a leap forward in cutting edge technology doing this. For these reasons, the publicist leading this fight, mostly the team alleging smearing star Blake Lively on behalf of her co-star and producer-director Justin Baldoni, but also many others involved here, both directly and tangentially, are Hollywood's villains of the year. And then he's like, have you read the complaint? And they talk about Melissa Nathan and Amber. Melissa Nathan, one of Baldoni's PR people, and he writes, last seen sliming Amber Heard out of Hollywood on behalf of Johnny Depp during their defamation trial, and Jen Abel, who worked alongside my old buddy Stephanie Jones. Now, Stephanie Jones, this is a new character on this, in this whole story. He writes, a publicist so vindictive and dishonest that Business Insider recently devoted 3,500 words to her behavior. The text seemed lifted from a mustache-twirling cartoon nemesis. We can bury anyone. I think we need to put the social combat plan in motion. We can't write we will destroy her. Plus, Jed Wallace. Jed Wallace, you'll remember from the first two parts. He's a notorious figure in crisis PR who positions himself as a master manipulator of the narrative, all on behalf of a guy, Baldoni, who stands accused of sexual harassment, which his lawyer denies. Brian Friedman, his lawyer, denies this, despite repeatedly calling himself a feminist ally and hosting a podcast where he talks about his activism all the time. Can't make this stuff up, Matthew Baldoni writes. As enjoyable as it is to see gross texts and awful people exposed in the New York Times and now across the media, their strategies aren't too shocking, given the modern realities of high-stakes PR wars. Maybe I'm jaded because I've been on the receiving end of these campaigns, but lots of publicists and lawyers are aggressive in a crisis. You get fired these days if you aren't, and Abel claimed in a Facebook post that the machinations were mostly preparation. There was no smear implemented. I seriously doubt that, he writes. Case in point, on August 10th, the day after It Ends With Us came out, Nathan's team reported that they had started to see a shift on social due largely to Jed and his team's effort to shift the narrative. That sure sounds like implementation, but even the Times acknowledged it's impossible to determine whether any of the alleged sliming was actually responsible for that shift in sentiment or the ultimate damage to Lively's brands. So Matthew is postulating here that, listen, just because that New York Times article came out and even with the paperwork, you still have to prove it. You have to prove it. You have to prove it legally, but you don't have to prove it for us. Like you know what I'm saying? Like we can't give Blake Lively money. We are the consumers of this. So they are winning the public war, or that's, what this paperwork is doing is helping win the public war because Blake was losing the public war for so long, or, since August. Said, there were damages to Lively's brands, but how can you prove that? Sales of those brands tanked, but how much is provably his team's fault? What's most interesting, he writes, and frankly a little bit gross, if also understandable, is how Lively's team has chosen to fight back. Her lawyers at Minot and Wilkie, Farr and Gallagher filed this matter as a 10-count complaint with California's Civil Rights Department. It's not an actual lawsuit, but a first step towards a suit, and it encourages the state to investigate on its own, but it also allows for some rare pre-complaint discovery. Now that's important. Discovery, a similar strategy to the one Wilkie is deploying on behalf of Drake in his ongoing war with Universal Music Group. We've talked about this on the show before. Remember, Drake filed against Universal Music Group, or is prepping to file against Universal Music Group, saying that they have inflated the streams of Kendrick Lamar's and his the back and forth between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar's hit song, was it Not Like Us, right? Really proven to be old on this, Not Like Us. Drake was saying, and Drake works with UMG. Drake works with the Universal Music Group, and he knows. So if he's suing, he knows that Universal Music Group potentially has inflated his own streams on his digital music, and that's potentially why he knows they did it for Kendrick. Even though I will say, and I've said it, like that song was fucking in the public consciousness. I listened to that song at least 1 million times. everybody listened to that song. So I think it was like definitely a hit, but Drake is filing this lawsuit against UMG. He's going to war, which I just truly think makes him look even worse, but that's another story. Continuing with the article, that led to the early subpoena of these private and highly inflammatory text messages. So that's what the discovery did. That's how we got these text messages. But remember, the subpoena wasn't to Abel or Baldoni or anyone at Wayfair. So you're saying, how did they get their hands on these text messages? But they got them from none other than Stephanie Jones, who terminated Abel in late August and by all accounts hates her guts. So now this is a whole other layer of hate, a whole new avenue of the story that has nothing to do with Baldoni or Lively. Now it's a personal vendetta between PR people, one that had been fired. So Stephanie Jones, who Abel used to work for, she is the one that gave these text messages because she is going to be suing as well. Multiple sources told me that Jones confiscated Abel's work phone as part of that split, which was particularly heated because Abel was leaving to start her own firm, which then represented Baldoni, I believe. And I still will never understand why Abel didn't use a encrypted app to send any of these messages. And the fact that she did this on the work phone is just wild. Since then, Jones has been on a crusade against her former colleague, Abel, and those who know Jones well have told me she will stop at nothing to harm a perceived enemy. Woo! When Jones didn't like a story I wrote about her clients Lauren Sanchez and Jeff Bezos, this Page 6 story calling me sexist appeared days later, written by Sarah Nathan. And Sarah Nathan, remember, is the sister of the other Nathan that is involved in the PR campaign, which we covered in the law documents. It's Melissa's sister, Sarah Nathan. When Dwayne The Rock Johnson split with Jones last year, negative media coverage began appearing about him. At the time, Jones denied she was responsible. So it sounds like Stephanie Jones is not someone to mess with. Huge fan, Stephanie. I love you. Keep up the good work. So all of a sudden, Jones was subpoenaed for Abel's private communications, which were then leaked to the Times for an article that absolutely buried Abel. At the very least, it appears that Jones maybe volunteered those texts to harm her nemesis, even if they also hurt Wayfair, and Lively's lawyers maybe laundered the source via the subpoena. Compliance with the subpoena could also free Stephanie Jones, from confidentiality obligations she had to Abel. So this is some backroom dealing. This is dirty, man. So they're saying potentially that Stephanie Jones can use the subpoena as an excuse for having to release these when she probably or maybe allegedly released them because she truly hates Abel at this point for screwing her over and all of this stuff. The article continues. It also maybe seems notable that neither Jones nor her company Jones Works is mentioned a single time in either the Lively complaint or the Times story. Isn't that fascinating, you guys? That's why Stephanie Jones is a new character in all this, but a crucial character that was nowhere in any of the paperwork documentation or the New York Times article, which we covered in the first 2 episodes. And this is weird because she was the Wayfarer publicist and Abel's employer when much of the allegedly nefarious activities went down. The Times noted that Nathan's PR firm was backed by Scooter Braun. But that tidbit would have been even more interesting had the story mentioned that Braun had been also repped by, you guessed it, Stephanie Jones. Braun's passive involvement in a slime campaign against Lively, a BFF of his nemesis Taylor Swift, herself a master of her own media narrative, adds another incestuous element to this sordid affair, as does the fact that Jones' husband is Jason Hodes, an agent at William Morris Endeavor, which reps both Lively and her husband Ryan Reynolds, and which just dropped Justin Baldoni under a client, and he presumes no doubt under pressure from the Reynolds Livelies. So he's speculating that Reynolds Lively pressured WME to drop Baldoni as a client. I don't know if I necessarily believe that because I think WME would have made those moves themselves. He also discloses that WME represents Puck, the digital online thing that I'm reading this from right now. But that they don't represent him personally. Good luck now, Matthew. Speaking of WME, William Morris Endeavor, let's not pretend that the agency whose parent company continues to employ caught-on-video wife beater Dana White, who is the head of the UFC, cut Baldoni due to anything other than financial considerations. I've had several conversations with WME agents this year about how they just don't quickly cancel people. They consider accusations carefully and convene a client action committee of stakeholders before they drop anyone, as they did with Morgan Wallen, the country music singer, in 2021 after his racist comments surfaced. And yet, no such committee was convened before Baldoni was booted. Why? Optics, yes, and both Sony and SAG-AFTRA have since put out statements supporting Lively. But Lively and Reynolds, a massive WME client, are almost certainly calling the shots. Remember when J.J. Abrams and his wife Katie McGrath basically demanded that CAA fire agent Adam Berkowitz after he was accused of inappropriate conduct? Similar vibes here. That's why the behind-the-scenes stuff is so fascinating, you guys, and we're very not aware of really all the behind-the-scenes machinations. That's why these articles are so important, and it's just sometimes so much more fascinating than the movies themselves, which is the saddest part of all of this. All of this because they want to tell a story. They want to put out this story, and the story of It Ends With Us is about DV, which is an important topic. And we are so far away from talking about that topic at this point. Also, J.J. Abrams and his wife, Katie McGrath, they produced one of the most popular entertainment things of this past year, and that, of course, is Gracie Abrams. Yes, Gracie Abrams is the daughter of J.J. Abrams and Katie McGrath. She also then has a Taylor Swift connection, as she opened for her at the beginning of the Eras Tour and the final stops on the Eras Tour, and she has massive songs right now. She was just on SNL and killed it on SNL. And, her music is used all over TikTok. But isn't it funny how it's just this tangled web? And it's all these relationships of people hating each other. And I also think this is an important time to point out to everybody, and I think you know this already, but remember, we are humans. We all make mistakes. We all fuck up. We fuck up badly. We do. Everybody, everybody, even your favorite movie stars, even your favorite music stars. And I guess it's very interesting to see how you survive in this realm. Are you a gladiator in these instances? Now, people like Diddy's done. Even if Diddy is able to win his case somehow, some miracle happens, he's toast. I don't think you can come back if you are Diddy. But all of these other people, Morgan Wallen, still one of the top 10 music artists in terms of pure sales and concert ticket sales. So his racist comments of 2021, it really didn't do anything for his, to his career. Right now it'll be interesting to think about the country music star Zach Bryan, who had the split with Brianna Chicken Fry, and there was a wave of hate against him, rightfully so. But he is still able to sell out stadiums. Continuing with the article. Anyway, knowing that this Steph Jones angle would all come out during the litigation, Lively's lawyers admitted to me today that her company was the source of the texts. Quote, the subpoena disclosed and referenced in the complaint was served on Jones Work LLC, they said in a statement. The internal documents referred to in the complaint were produced subject to that subpoena. They say more information is forthcoming, but declined to comment further. For its part, the Time story, whose byline included Megan Twohy of Harvey Weinstein Pulitzer fame, she was one of the people that wrote the Harvey Weinstein piece that won the Pulitzer. These are real amazing reporters, further elevating the allegations. So to put somebody like Megan Twohy on it, that's like, wow, we got the best to talk about this situation who talked about a previous situation of work impropriety. Sorry. Having trouble with my tongue today. They revealed only that the private communications were subpoenaed, neglecting to mention that they were subpoenaed from Stephanie Jones, who has a clear axe to grind in that situation. That's maybe interesting too, he writes. Adding yet more fuel to the fire, Brian Friedman, the litigator for Wayfarer, Baldoni, Nathan, and Abel. Remember Brian Friedman? He's represents Bethany Frankel, The Reality Reckoning, represents a lot of people that you have heard of in the media. He's very good at his job. Brian Friedman is now claiming that the complete set of texts from Abel's phone will show that Lively's team cherry-picked communications that are deliberately misleading, altered, and are taken completely out of context, like we said earlier. The irony, he said, will be that the smear campaign is Lively's team purposely withholding texts that prove that no smear campaign ever took place. The texts out there already are pretty bad. Regardless, Friedman is now planning to sue Jones personally. Steph did not respond to my request for comment, Matthew Baldoni reports. It's getting crazy. Brian Friedman is going to sue Stephanie Jones. So Stephanie Jones is now in this, even though she was able to hide that her texts and messages are the way that they got Abel's texts and emails and put them in the Blake Lively complaint. What I'm looking for is the timeline of when Reynolds and Lively got these texts. Like, they've been plotting this since August. I wonder how many weeks into the end of August did they decide to build their case and just stay quiet. That's the timeline is going to be really fascinating. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, if these are cherry picked, if you can't really prove that the negative smear campaign actually affected Blake Lively, or if there was a negative smear campaign, or if it was just actual natural hate for Blake Lively that they were able to amplify. The other part of this, Matthew Baldoni points out, is where there's another issue here. So Baldoni's team may have supercharged negative sentiment or boosted unflattering interviews of Lively, but they didn't create those interviews out of thin air. That's why Lively's complaint includes breach of contract and retaliation claims. Essentially, the aggressive PR tactics might not be actionable, except for the fact that she had accused Baldoni of sexual harassment, and his company agreed in writing that it wouldn't attack her in response. So that's where the second part of this podcast, we talked about the complaint in Wayfarer Studios. Remember, there was the 30-count agreement to get Blake Lively back to work after the Writers Guild strike. They had the all-hands-on-deck in-person meeting that included Ryan Reynolds and everybody involved coming up with this list of deliverables for Blake Lively to feel safe on set. And they agreed to this in writing. So that's another aspect of this that is potentially actionable. Continuing with the article, that broadside letter contract stemmed from Lively's claim of harassment on set, after which she got Baldoni and Wayfarer to agree to refrain from this. 30 separate categories, no more adding of sex scenes, oral sex, or on-camera climaxing by Lively outside the scope of the script she approved when signing on to the project. That agreement laid the groundwork for her current harassment claim, and it also allowed her to argue a breach of the provision that called for no retaliation of any kind, which was in the 30 point. No retaliation of any kind was in that 30 point agreement. So no retaliation of any kind against Lively, including during publicity and promotional work. Even if Lively spread dirt on Baldoni, which she maintains at this point she didn't, she was under no such constraint. So she could have, because that wasn't part of her contract, and she didn't. A pretty smart strategy, though this case is certainly in the early stages. With Brian Friedman promising to sue Jones, a fiery response from Baldoni's team expected as soon as this week. Get ready for the first week of the year, folks. By the way, will they do it on Monday? Will they do it on the 30th? Will they get this new year started with a bang? God, I was about to say these poor lawyers, but no, we don't need to feel pity for lawyers. They charge a very pretty penny. I would love to know Brian Friedman's hourly rate, but I'm curious. Are they going to fire back this week? And a full civil lawsuit likely from Blake Lively. This situation could unmask the rat-fucking underworld of Hollywood crisis PR like nothing since the Weinstein exposés. Beautiful prose. The unmask the rat-fucking underworld of oh my God. Matthew Baldoni, I love you. The allegations in the complaint are head-turning, but I think it's nothing compared to the litigation that's coming. Puck's legal expert Eric Gardner slacked me today. He'll have more on Thursday, he writes. Indeed, 2024 may end up a turning point when the Cold War over public perception of celebrities turned hot. So that was Matthew Baldoni's article in puck.news. Maybe I'll keep my subscription to this thing because I loved that article so much. Okay, so we have that out of the way. And I think that adds that whole layer to the story with Stephanie Jones, which is where we found that's how they got the text messages and emails exchanged, because Jennifer Abel worked for Stephanie Jones and she was fired, went to start her own company, but she had done all of this on company computers and company phones. So Stephanie Jones, with an axe to grind against Abel, was like, here you go, but under the guise of a subpoena. Allegedly. It could have just been subpoena and she has no axe to grind, but this article presented as there was in Axe to Grind. Now, let's move on to this excellent Twitter thread. I'll just still call it Twitter, from Ariadna Jacob. Her handle is Little Miss Jacob. And I just think this is an interesting perspective. And it speaks a little bit about the Matthew Baldoni in terms of, what you can prove and stuff. And I highly recommend following her on X. I'm not I'm on X. I'm just not using it anymore, but this was sent to me, so it brought me back. If we could just get away from the insane bullshit on X, it'd be a much better place. But you can find me on Threads and Blue Sky, but I just make fart jokes. She writes, follow along on this journey with me. I'll show you how it works. She writes, full disclosure, I take no pleasure in doing Brian Friedman's, that's Baldoni's lawyer, job for him. This is the same attorney who repped a talent agency I sued once, she writes, but exposing Hollywood smear tactics, that's a personal passion, so why not? Who can blame Friedman for being good at his job? I will call a truce to cover this fairly just for you guys, she writes. And she has a photo of an issue of The Hollywood Reporter from last year that it was entitled Hollywood's Dark Night. And it's all about Brian Friedman and the people he represents, like Bethany Frankel, like Megyn Kelly, like old Tucker Carlson and Don Lemon, all people that have been in the news and have had, very interesting PR strategies and a lot of people coming for them. He represents all of them, or had at one time. She starts off, the complaints paints Baldoni as orchestrating a smear campaign against Lively for speaking out about workplace harassment. But here's the kicker, she writes. Much of the evidence relies on implication, not proof. So now she is talking about that legal complaint we covered in part 2, saying the evidence, it relies on implicating, but there's not a lot of proof, which I have a feeling is going to be part of Baldoni's response from Brian Friedman. Example, a publicist texted, not Baldoni, "We can bury anyone." That was from the Publicist. It's not Baldoni saying it, she writes, and the complaint doesn't tie that message back to him. This is a classic PR move. Make it look damning by association. So they're saying, even in this complaint by Lively, they are using old school PR tactics that are not necessarily fair. Damning by association. Meanwhile, Baldoni's texts tell a different story. He reportedly said, "I'm not in love with this strategy." Does that sound like a guy plotting revenge or someone uneasy about how his team is handling damage control? Other than that, it's texts where Baldoni says he wants to bring the movie back to the issue of DV. Granted, that wasn't the alleged Sony-approved marketing strategy, but hey, it's Baldoni's film. So, and she has those texts. They are alleging that Baldoni did this because he was seeing that it didn't play well for Blake and the rest of the team, and he wanted to make himself look good instead of genuinely believing in the story of DV. Now, like I said in part 2, I do have to imagine he thought or still thinks that his heart was in the right place, and he truly believes, in this story, in the message. But it's hard not to tie it all back to PR to make him look good. Okay? Now, she writes, under California law, harassment must show a pattern of an unwelcome behavior with intent to harm. Discomfort isn't enough. Does the complaint meet this standard? Right now, it's heavy on storytelling, light on actionable facts. So what we were saying is that this legal document is a page turner. It's like a John Grisham book when I used to read John Grisham books. But can you have action? Is there actionable things where, you could legally be in trouble? Key legal considerations she includes from the California Civil Rights Department. Intent versus perception. Harassment claims often hinge on whether the conduct was intentional and whether a reasonable person would find it offensive. Unintentional actions that cause discomfort may not meet the legal threshold for harassment unless they are severe or pervasive. And then there's a single incident severity. The California Supreme Court has clarified that a single severe incident, such as the use of a racial epithet, can constitute harassment if it creates a hostile work environment. Employer liability. Employers are required to take reasonable steps to prevent and correct wrongful behavior in the workplace. Failure to do so can result in liability even if the employer was unaware of the harassment, which brings us back to the all-hands-on-deck meeting where they had those 30 actionable items. One of those items, like we said, being you cannot retaliate against Blake Lively. Now, we talked about, she goes on to talk about the breastfeeding trailer claim, where Baldoni and Jamie Heath, the producer and one of the heads of Wayfair, went into her trailer while she was breastfeeding, and they would go into her trailer without invitation multiple times. She writes, Lively alleges Baldoni walked into her trailer while she was breastfeeding. Is there evidence this happened? If so, how many times? Was this a deliberate invasion of privacy or just bad timing? Intent matters. For example, some women breastfeed openly without concern, while others prefer privacy. Feeling uncomfortable, while totally plausible, I'm not denying Lively could very well have felt this way, doesn't automatically mean harassment occurred. It depends on context, boundaries, intent, and evidence. So she's saying, if we're taking this into the realm of the law, can you prove it? Can they just literally argue, I'm sorry, that was not my intent. I just had to come in to tell you that we pushed this scene back later in the day, right? That's what they could argue. They could say, no, you have to prove that this was deliberately done to make her uncomfortable, or at least that's how I'm perceiving this. She then goes, I have no interest in making enemies with Hollywood power players like Sony, Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, Taylor Swift, WME, Justin Baldoni, Brian Friedman, Lively's lawyers, or even, she said she's just trying to pull back the curtain on how all of this works. I second that. I love everybody. That's not true. Then she goes on to talk about the lip-biting improvisation. Remember, in the complaint, said he improvised lip-biting in a kissing scene. The complaint describes Baldoni improvising a lip-biting moment during a scene which Lively alleges crossed boundaries. Improvisation is common in Hollywood and often encouraged to enhance a scene's authenticity. Whether the moment constitutes misconduct hinges on critical context. Was there evidence of repeated discomfort or a refusal to address boundaries? So far, the complaint doesn't prove this. Without further details, it's difficult to distinguish this from a creative decision gone wrong, which is what I said in part 2. I've worked with a lot of actors. Fucking weird. They think they're like, oh, I'm feeling it. It's moving through my body. It's like what this character would do. I just improv'd it. It felt right in the moment. Wasn't it good? Interesting, she writes, there's little case law I could find in California addressing actors suing over similar onset issues. For example, in Lyle versus Warner Brothers, 2006, sexual jokes weren't harassment because they weren't aimed at the plaintiff. In Zetwick versus Yolo County, 2017, repeated unwelcome hugs crossed the threshold into harassment, but it was a police officer, not an actor. The gap between these rulings show how vital specific context and evidence are. This isn't the first time unscripted physical actions on set have sparked controversy. In The Mindy Project, Mindy Kaling admitted to spontaneously kissing guest star Lee Pace during a scene without consent. Even though it was framed as a joke, her writers warned her about potential legal issues. While the incident drew public criticism for its lack of professionalism and respect for personal boundaries, there is no record of legal action taken by Pace against Kaling. The complaint alleges Baldoni discussed his past porn addiction openly, which made Lively uncomfortable. She reportedly asked him privately to stop bringing it up, but the complaint claims he later told the cast she'd never seen porn, which escalated the discomfort. Context matters. Once again, Baldoni's porn addiction wasn't a random topic. It's something he's openly discussed on his Man Enough podcast as part of a larger conversation about masculinity, vulnerability, and recovery. Around 3 to 6% of adults struggle with porn addiction, and many podcasts and discussions aim to destigmatize the topic as part of a broader mental health and relationship conversations. A key question: did Baldoni stop when Lively raised her concerns? The complaint doesn't clarify whether the behavior continued or worsened after her private request. Without evidence of a repeated pattern, it's hard to elevate the intentional misconduct. Oversharing often overlaps with neurodivergence like ADHD, where social cues are missed and discussions can unintentionally create discomfort. While this context doesn't excuse the behavior, it invites the question, was this harassment or an earnest attempt to foster dialogue that missed the mark? And this is why you got to go follow her, because she actually puts in clips of this conversation on one of his podcasts, We Are Man Enough, talking about his porn addiction. She continues, the allegation about Baldoni saying he spoke to Lively's late father. This is the one that really creeped me out. And she writes, strange? Absolutely. Malicious? Unclear. If talking to dead people automatically counts as harassment, Tyler Henry better lay low. This might be the weirdest detail in the entire complaint. I felt the same exact way. Without tone or context, it's impossible to know if this was a misguided attempt at connection or something more sinister. The ambiguity leaves everyone guessing. But right, But right, but like she pointed out earlier, they're telling a story in this legal document, and they're telling a story for us because they don't need to sue on this, but they're telling this, so they're getting this information out there, right? So I think parts of this 80-page complaint isn't about for the legal filing. It's for us to get these details out to us, the audience. The PR drama in the Lively Baldoni saga is messy. Allegations of social manipulation claim Baldoni's PR team worked to discredit Lively. Sounds familiar. Think Depp Heard, a public battle with PR teams shaping narratives to sway perception. And it's very frustrating to even this day that people still, because they love Johnny Depp so much, they still can't accept a world in which there was narratives created, PR narratives shaped to really destroy Heard even further than she was destroying herself. There is no perfect victim, right? But we have to accept that these things happen. And that's why I think this story is so fascinating, because it's a little bit of proof. It's a lot of bit of proof. She writes, how did we get here? Subpoenas to Jones Works. Baldoni's former PR firm exposed texts about managing media and spinning narratives. If you followed celebrity PR before, you know this playbook. Deflect, distract, and defend the client. That's eerily reminiscent of Luigi Mangione. Deflect, distract, and defend. Interesting. Jones Works, run by Stephanie Jones, who we just talked about in the Matthew Baldoni article, denies knowing about tactics against Lively. Meanwhile, her firm is also embroiled in its own dispute with Baldoni, alleging defamation. Former Jones Works employee Jennifer Abel jumped ship to work for Baldoni's new crisis PR team. Jones claims Abel helped Baldoni undermine Lively. As of now, there's no direct evidence connecting Abel to anything retaliatory. And we will read, because Jen Abel, I believe, is the one that posted in a Facebook group. I don't know if that was 100% her or if that was trickery, but we're going to read her comments that she posted in an industry Facebook group in the past week, which sounds like another insane thing, if true, that she would put out any form of statement that she knows would be kind of just thrown around, which then makes me think if that is her, there must have been a reason why. The texts don't prove Baldoni personally orchestrated anything. They do show PR firms doing what they do best, shaping public perception, using media connections, and controlling narratives, all while staying just on the legal side of shady. Yes, it's gross. Oh, and of course, Amber Heard already spoke up and inserted herself as a supporter of Lively, which Amber Heard went on record this week doing. The silver lining, she writes, these tactics are rarely exposed. The fact that Jones Works and the other PR firm's internal strategy is out in the open is a rare look behind the PR curtain. And spoiler, it's uglier than you think. The real question, was Baldoni's PR team retaliating against Lively, or were they just running standard damage control? The exposed texts don't prove malice. They show a messy strategic scramble to protect Baldoni, which they were paid to do, you guys. Hollywood PR operates in gray areas, which is what we started this whole podcast talking about, gray areas. It's not illegal to spin a narrative, but when it crosses into undermining or silencing accusers, it reveals how power works in the industry. And she has this gif of Kevin Spacey saying hunt or be hunted from House of Cards, which Kevin Spacey, man, they really needed Stephanie Jones and Jennifer Abel on his case a couple years ago. Okay, but I'm not done, she writes. Here's another weird claim. The best friend casting critique. Remember that from the complaint where he cast his best friend as the OBGYN in a scene where it's like, you shouldn't be casting your friends to watch me half naked? Lively's complaint says, Baldoni cast his friend. Adam Monshine, who plays the OBGYN, has a master's in acting from UCLA and legit credits. Bad casting, a SAG breach, or just Team Lively disliking Baldoni's pick? The complaint doesn't give enough specifics. So this is where Ariadna Jacob, who has this whole beautiful Twitter thread, she says this dude, he actually has a master's in acting from UCLA. He might not be a star, but he's definitely an actor. Is he also best friends with Baldoni? Probably. But I will say, just having worked in this town for a long time, as a shitty actor, you have a lot of actor friends. I have a lot of actor friends. And a lot of the parts that I have received have been because I have known somebody and because I'm just damn good at delivering 3 lines as a coffee barista. That's why this complaint has some red flags for me, she writes. Creative power struggles are Hollywood 101. Baldoni had the film rights to It Ends With Us. Lively, Reynolds, and the writer had sway too. Miscommunication and clashing visions are often reframed as something darker in these disputes. Why does this matter? Hollywood thrives on the public not understanding its inner workings. Once you see how narratives are spun, you stop being a pawn in the PR chess game. Woo! Guys, we're looking through the Matrix right now. Hold on. But I will say, remember, like just somebody that's read every Hollywood book that I could get my little hands on as a kid, even until today, I devoured everything. You know, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, a great book. Down and Dirty Players, a great Hollywood book. It was High Voltage about Don Simpson, great Hollywood book. There are all the You'll Never Eat Lunch in This Town Again, great Hollywood book. But it talks about the inner workings of every movie. Sounds like a fucking battle. I just recently rewatched The Godfather, and you think about the making of The Godfather. They literally, studios wanted to fire Al Pacino after the first 2 weeks of filming. And Francis Ford Coppola had to go to battle for him. Like, people are literally out to get everybody's jobs from day one, even into pre-production, into production, into post-production. It's all a battle. And that's what's so frustrating, because you're just trying to make a piece of art, right? You're just trying to make this thing. And all of these concerns, mainly based on let's get our money, it creates this thunderstorm. Finally, the "we can bury anyone" text, she writes. The smear campaign accusation hinges on texts subpoenaed from Abel, Baldoni's publicist, not Baldoni himself. The complaint includes dramatic phrases like "we can bury anyone," but it doesn't show Baldoni instructing her to say or do any of this. Baldoni's promotional comments about Lively were overwhelmingly positive, calling her incredible. Why elevate her work if his goal was retaliation? The disconnect between his public praise and the PR team's behavior muddles the complaint narrative. And she has a clip of him praising Blake Lively. Now, our little suspicious brains that want to muddy everything, we're like, yeah, but he knew they were doing their dirty work, right? So he was going to be the positive person saying everything's amazing. Right? Interesting. Moreover, Baldoni himself expressed discomfort with the approach as shown in text. I'm not in love with the document. We've talked about this already. One of the complaint's most dramatic claims is tied to a text from Baldoni. This is what we would need. The complaint heavily implies this is about painting Lively as a bully. But where's the evidence? There's one screenshot lacks context and doesn't explain who or what he was referring to. This was the thing where he had sent the Twitter thread bagging on Hailey Bieber, Justin Bieber's wife. And, think about how much hate Hailey Bieber has had out there over the years. I mean, just because of the Selena Gomez thing and so many other things, but saying this is the one thing we can tie to Baldoni if he wanted to do malicious intent. And he's saying this is what we would need. And it's a malicious Twitter thread. Well, that's a little proof, right? She writes, without more context, Baldoni could have been referencing literally anything. A thread on X about women bullying other women who came forward about domestic violence or some other unrelated topic. We don't know. And that ambiguity is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. The complaint adds flair with claims that Baldoni's PR team being reassured that Lively would be destroyed and buried. But let's be clear, there's no screenshot of Baldoni actually saying those words or anyone reassuring him they were destroying anyone. This is an interpretation, not a fact. And the law depends on fact. So we interpret that. The court document interprets that. And it does. The court document, I'm like, yeah, I think it's pretty clear. But you can't prove that because you don't have the smoking gun. You have these people going, oh, he wants us to say we're going to bury her, but we can't do that. Imagine if that got out. But them saying he wants us to say is not him saying, right? So you can throw that out potentially. Framing these texts as a coordinated smear campaign is more clever than conclusive. It's classic lawfare. Crafting a narrative to sound damning without definitive proof. Strong storytelling is not the same as strong evidence. Don't get the two twisted, she writes. So that was her thread. I thought this was brilliant. Go support her. It looks like I think she has a YouTube channel as well. It's Ari Jacob. Little Miss Jacob is her YouTube account, which I'm sure she's probably covered this on her YouTube account as well. So, man, we got to get her on the show. This was great. And like I said, her Twitter handle is Little Miss Jacob. I don't know her, but man, great work if this gets back to you in any way. But go support her. Sounds like she knows what what's so great about these two things, the Matthew Baldoni article and this, it presents further context. It throws in what we're going to potentially see with Baldoni and Brian Friedman's answer to Blake Lively's complaint, and it starts confusing the narrative a little bit or shining a light on the other side of the narrative. Now, I'm not a lawyer. Having read all of this, and I have not read Baldoni's complaint firing back yet. But like I said earlier, and people are upset at me, like there is still this faction of people that are like, fuck Blake Lively. I think this proves a lot of things of a very unhealthy, toxic work environment. Did she participate in that? Maybe. I'm sure we're going to hear more about that. But there were a lot of things done in a movie that had really, big themes on DV, sexuality, all of this stuff that you have to kind of go above and beyond to make sure that people on set, not just the women, but men as well, comfortable. That's why intimacy coordinators are a new position in Hollywood that should have been used from the jump. And I'm kind of shocked that a movie distributed by Sony would not have those in place already, right? That just seems a little weird to me when dealing with all of this. Okay, so we've got those two things out of the way. Where does our wheel take us next? Let's move to what I was speaking about Jennifer Abel, the PR person, her Facebook message in this Facebook group. Now, the message has since been deleted, but it did what it needed to do because it got picked up by everybody. But it's fascinating. If you do a quick Google search and I put Jennifer Abel Facebook post, this does not pop up at all. But if you do like Justin Baldoni, Jennifer Abel, it comes up. The Hollywood Reporter did an article on December 23rd saying Justin Baldoni's publicist breaks silence, defends leaked texts about Blake Lively. And it talks about it before it was deleted. Abel posted a defense of her crisis team exchanges on Facebook, saying that they largely amounted to joking about how fans were reacting to the Lively-Baldoni feud during the marketing campaign and did not show that Baldoni's team ever took specific action against Lively. The Facebook posts have since been deleted, but the Hollywood Reporter has confirmed their legitimacy. So this is her Facebook post. This is some of her writing. What the cherry-picked messages don't include, although not shockingly as it doesn't fit the narrative, is that there was no smear implemented. No negative press was ever facilitated. No social combat plan, although we were prepared for it as it's our job to be ready for any scenario. Remember, we talked about that in the complaint about their, what if Ryan Reynolds says something, during the promotion of the movie? This is what we will enact then. It's a little hazy already, though, because there are so many kind of text exchanges talking about, catching and killing a story and, dealing with the Daily Mail, Us Weekly, suppressing things and also getting them to not talk about the HR complaints, the lingering on the kiss, all of that stuff, right? And they were congratulating themselves about it. They thought they were being really sly, which they were. They were doing a good job for what they were hired to do. But she's saying none of these things were ever implemented. Sure, we talked about it, she writes, contemplated if we needed certain things, flagged accounts that we needed to monitor, worked with the social team to help us stay on top of the narrative so we would act quickly if needed. And yes, we rejoiced and joked in the fact that fans were recognizing our clients' heart and work without us having to do anything but keep our heads down and focus on positive interviews for our client. So they're saying, man, Justin Baldoni's great. His previous work, all they needed to do was like highlight that. And there was enough shit about Blake Lively in the past that snowballed itself without them having to do the heavy lifting. That's what she alleges. She writes, as the texts show, we sophomorically reveled and again joked privately to each other about the internet's feedback to the women whose team was making our lives incredibly difficult over the course of the campaign. I'm human, she writes. The long hours, months of preparation on top of my day-to-day scope, it felt good to see that although we were prepared, we didn't have to do anything over the top to protect our client. Abel then explained what she meant by claiming Lively's team was making their lives incredibly difficult. She writes, I was notified at the start of the marketing campaign that the opposing team had been planting horrible stories about my client, Justin Baldoni, as a failsafe if my client did not comply with the demands set forth for the campaign, which is why we brought on a crisis team as it's not something that I do. My sole job was to put together interviews, screening opportunities, and speaking opportunities for my client in support of the film, a standard scope of work. My question here, though, standard scope of work, even though the Sony document in terms of how to promote the movie did not, it wasn't wanting them to do these speaking opportunities talking about DV. So it almost does feel like anyways, to continue. I did my job, she writes. Now, what kind of woman would work against another woman who was a victim of all the things being claimed. Thanks for asking, she writes. After reviewing the evidence, facts, hard proof that countered every single thing that was being claimed and demanded at the start of production, I made a choice to stand by my client of almost 5 years who had dedicated his life to the equal treatment of others, especially women, who had no incidents of negative treatment of others. Well, that's not true. There were other HR complaints. Okay. And who had a wonderful community and team at Wayfair, who all held the same moral fortitude and lived their life accordingly. As representatives, we all have to make that choice. So I did that to my best of my ability and felt good about our efforts. But I mean, we could speculate maybe that these people at Wayfair, including Jamie Heath, the other producer, maybe they got too lost in the sauce thinking they were like these knights in white shining armor and just completely sometimes missed the point and generally made people feel uncomfortable. Because remember, this wasn't just Blake Lively. These were a lot of other people that worked on the film who have yet to be named. The Hollywood Reporter article says also on Monday, attorney Brian Friedman, who reps Baldoni along with Abel and Nathan. So Brian Friedman also represents Jen Abel, who this Facebook post came from, and Miss Nathan. He started to go on attack. Brian Friedman writes, Tag PR operated as any other crisis management firm would when hired by a client experiencing threats by two extremely powerful people with unlimited resources. Are the two people Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, or Blake Lively and God? Blake Lively. Anyways, the standard scenario planning Tag PR drafted proved unnecessary as audiences found Lively's own actions, interviews, and marketing during the promotional tour distasteful and responded organically to that which the media themselves picked up on it. It's ironic that the New York Times, through their effort to uncover an insidious PR effort, played directly into the hands of Lively's own dubious PR tactics by publishing leaked personal text exchanges that lack critical context, the very same tactics she's accusing the firm of implementing, Brian Friedman writes. So now we've just it's inception. We're like eating, it's like a snake or mouse eating its tail or whatever that term is. The messages between Abel and Nathan included a key exchange where Abel pushes the crisis team. I think you guys need to be tough and show the strength of what you guys can do in these scenarios. Baldoni wants to feel like she can be buried. To which Nathan replied, of course, but when we send over documents, we can't send over the work we will or could do because that could get us in a lot of trouble. So she acknowledges this is not good. We can't write, we will destroy her. Imagine if a document saying all the things that he wants, meaning Baldoni, ends up in the wrong hands. We can bury anyone. Also, another point that I want to take time to stop and go, Miss Abel, Miss Nathan, I'm just reading papers. I'm just a tiny little podcast. As far as how these messages became public, it brings up the Jones work that, the Jones work that she put these out under the guise of a subpoena. Brian Friedman had some fiery words to say about the leaked text as well. Jonesworks was the PR company contractually responsible to promote and protect Wayfair and Justin Baldoni. Our investigation has determined that on August 21st, which is after the movie's release, Jonesworks utilized a lawyer and security guard to take possession of Wayfair's confidential information through confiscation of Jen Abel's phone. We are continuing to investigate the use of that confidential information, but demands are being made to Stephanie Jones and Leslie Sloan, and once we obtain the evidence, anyone actively involved in any possible connection with this abhorrent conduct will be sued into oblivion. This dude also has a way with words, just like Matthew Baldoni, will be sued into oblivion, Brian Friedman writes. The lawyer. Lively's legal team replied with a statement suggesting that the text messages were obtained legally. Quote, the subpoena disclosed and referenced in the complaint was served on Joneswork LLC. So they're saying, we served. It's not her fault. We served. She had to disclose because we did a subpoena. The internal documents referred to in the complaint were produced subject to that subpoena. We expect that further details regarding the subpoena process will be disclosed during discovery, said Abel in her post. I never thought the day would come when I needed to defend myself with my own peers, but this certainly has been an interesting and devastating, quite frankly, couple of days. So this is Miss Abel, Baldoni's publicist, going, wow. It's, but it's got to be like Inception for these people too. This is what they do for a living. And all of a sudden the mirror is turned around on them. Like, this is what we are paid to do. Really dirty business. In her filings, Lively claimed things got so bad on set. There was a meeting. We talked about the meeting already. We talked about the 30 demands. And Friedman previously released a lengthy statement denying the claims in her filing. It is shameful that Miss Lively and her representatives would make such a serious and categorically false accusations against Mr. Baldoni, Wayfarer Studios, and its representatives as yet another desperate attempt to fix her negative reputation, which was garnered from her own remarks and actions during the campaign for the film, interviews and press activities that were observed publicly in real time and unedited, which allowed for the internet to generate their own views and opinions. These claims are completely false, outrageous, and intentionally salacious with an intent to publicly hurt and rehash a narrative in the media. And then the story ends reminding us that Baldoni has been dropped by his representatives at WME. Also, the Voices of Solidarity Award given to Baldoni on December 9th, honoring remarkable men who have shown courage and compassion and advocating on behalf of women and girls, was rescinded. That's how the story ends. Okay, so this is like them fighting back and, obfuscating, whatever that word is, throwing more confusion into the mix, but also saying, listen, Baldoni's got a side as well, and that Blake Lively buried herself. So they have to prove, but this is what, just from somebody that is a consumer, a voracious consumer of all of this, you have to realize that once something is put out, everybody runs with it and it becomes an avalanche. So they do have to prove that they massaged this. And it really does, from that complaint, seems like they did. But can you prove that in a court of law? Or do you need to just prove that in the court of public opinion? And what are they hoping for? Because if they can prove this, and they can prove, like they did, or like they showed in the complaint, that Blake Lively's sales at Target completely got decimated after the fact, after this happened, then I think you are looking at real damages. Or already you have done reputational damage to Baldoni, just like they are arguing that Baldoni did reputational damage to Blake Lively. So that's another piece of this story. So now more with Justin Baldoni fighting back. This is a Daily Mail article from December 27th. The headline, Justin Baldoni's explosive fight back against Blake Lively revealed, claims her team smeared him, weaponized WhatsApps, and lawsuit is ploy to rebuild her image. Read Alison Boshoff's Bombshell World exclusive. So Alison Boshoff exclusive here. And, Daily Mail was talked about a lot in regards to PR. And this is one of those stories where I'm like, was this story encouraged? Was this truly reporting? It's reported, but was it reporting on behalf of Justin Baldoni, Brian Friedman, and all the rest? So they go over all the stuff, the stuff we've already talked about, the improvised kiss, the graphic video of the wife during birth, the discussion of porn addiction, more about her New York Times article about the Hollywood smear machine, talking about the movie, which went on to make $350 million worldwide. So it's all the stuff that we already know. Now it gets to the new stuff. For I can reveal, the reporter writes, that Baldoni's team are not giving up without a fight. As soon as the courts reopen after New Year on Thursday. Okay, so this gives us a date. So after New Year on Thursday, an explosive counter lawsuit will be filed by Baldoni, his business partner Jamie Heath, and the Publicist name in Lively's complaint. Now, if we want to go to TMZ, remember TMZ, like you guys are focused on it like I am, they have shots of Jamie Heath, Justin Baldoni, and Justin Baldoni's wife in what can be assumed was a crisis meeting, maybe at lawyer's office, but they have them in this past week, all kind of hands-on deck meeting. They will say that it is Lively's side who were responsible for smears against Baldoni rather than the other way around, and claim that apparently damning emails, texts, and WhatsApp messages from Baldoni's publicist have been presented in a way that changes their meaning. The counterclaim will also allege that Lively's publicist, Leslie Sloan, one of Hollywood's most influential women, tried to smear Baldoni by planting stories with numerous news organizations. Blake Lively needs to get Taylor Swift's publicist, T-Pain. T-Pain, come on. The nub of the legal action, which Baldoni's attorney Brian Friedman has spent the past few days preparing, is that Lively's complaint, unusually submitted to the California Civil Rights Department rather than a court, is a ploy to rebuild her public image. It will be claimed that an admittedly poor working relationship with Baldoni and a misconceived marketing strategy to sell a movie about domestic abuse suitable for a fun girls' night out. Fun girls' night out? What the fuck? This isn't a fun girls' night out movie. This reporter became a social media frenzy in which millions of people turned detective to delve into the evident fourrure between Lively and Baldoni. Their poor relationship on set was no secret. Baldoni's team contends that Blake Lash, grew online. Oh, so Blake Lively, like backlash, Blake-lash, grew online of its own accord with previous alleged missteps like Lively's 2012 wedding to Reynolds being held on a former slave plantation and her bitchy behavior to reporter Kirsty Fla during a 2016 TV interview, coming to light organically rather than being planted to discredit the actress, as her team claims. What everyone wants to know is this: is Blake Lively a diva, or is Justin Baldoni a creep, or could both of these things be true? Remember, we've talked about this from the beginning. Gray area. A source who was involved in this situation tells me, this is an unnamed source, do you seriously think that Blake Lively, married to one of the most powerful men in town and represented by one of the most powerful publicists, is going to sit meekly by if she is sexually harassed on a film set and then hang on for 4 months after the film is released before making a complaint? It makes no sense. The source adds, look, they never got on. Justin is they never got on. So this feels like somebody that's potentially British because, they never got on is a very, I think, British slang. Look, they never got on. They want best pals. Justin is very spiritual and a kind of unusual person, this source says. He is what you might call hippy-dippy. He thinks he can talk to dead people. Would he have said that he had spoken to Blake's dead father? Yes, absolutely. Did he harass her? He says not. They rubbed each other up the wrong way. She has taken bits of conversations which they had when he was trying to be her friend, when they were friendly, and weaponized them. Baldoni, who was born in LA and has 2 children with his 40-year-old wife Emily and a Swedish actress, started out as a TV actor, blah, 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 blah. Talking about the meeting, the all hands on deck meeting, which we've talked about, where the 30 rules were drawn up. Talking about Wayfarer Studios agreed to these demands. However, highly unusual, the article states, after filming was complete, Lively seized control of the movie from Baldoni. She hired her own editor, who had recently worked on her husband's superhero smash hit Deadpool and Wolverine, and is also the godfather of her son, to produce a final version of the film independently of Baldoni. Ahead of the film's premiere on August 6, Lively and a number of her co-stars, as well as the book's author Colleen Hoover, said they wouldn't do any press alongside Baldoni. At this point, says Lively, Baldoni began a malicious campaign of social manipulation. Okay, this is all the old stuff. She was backed by Amber Heard, who herself a victim of global trolling during her 2 court cases involving ex-husband Johnny Depp, by actress Gwyneth Paltrow, by the SAG-AFTRA union, and by the film's distributors Sony Pictures, who said in a statement, "We have previously expressed our support for Blake Lively in connection with her work and for the film. We fully and firmly reiterate that support today. Further, we strongly condemn any reputational attacks on her. Any such attacks have no place in our business or in civil society." Hooray for Hollywood. One of these stories claimed that Baldoni was the subject of 3 complaints to his film's company's HR team. His lawyer, Brian Friedman, will say that this is untrue. Sources indicate that they have a smoking gun, which they believe proves that Sloan was involved. Sloan is Blake Lively's PR person. When approached yesterday, Sloan told the Mail that it was a journalist who had contacted her about the complaints to HR about Baldoni after receiving an anonymous tip. So they're saying, she said, after that, quote, "I was contacted by various press outlets asking about allegations of HR complaints. When contacted, I responded to press questions by referring them to Wayfarer, the studio, or to Sony, the distributor. It's clear that Mr. Baldoni and his Wayfarer associates are suggesting that I originated press stories about HR complaints on set, which is false." So we have her saying on record that she did not have anything to do with it. So what is the smoking gun? Whatever the truth, this author writes, this will cause a meltdown in Hollywood, as it will be the juiciest and dirtiest peek into the underbelly of Hollywood's publicity machine in decades, and involves some of the biggest hitters in town. For her part, in a lengthy complaint, Lively claims that Sloan, who is not named in the lawsuit and referred to only as Publicist, had no idea at all about what was going on during or after filming. It's interesting. You would think she would, but they're claiming no. Her filing reads, Lively neither publicly commented nor directed any of her representatives to comment or engage with the print media, social media, or otherwise about the hostile environment Mr. Baldoni, Mr. Heath, and Wayfarer created. Indeed, throughout the time period discussed herein, Miss Lively did not provide her publicist with details about the hostile work environment that she, along with other cast and crew, experienced. The countersuit will also say that accusations of a smear leveled at Crisis PR's Melissa Nathan and Jen Abel are in themselves smears. Nathan and Abel will contend that text exchanges between them have been edited and presented in a way that gives inaccurate and damning impression. So they're claiming the Bravo Franken edit. They're claiming we got a bad edit. In a fascinating twist, the messages in question have come from Abel's mobile phone. They talk about Stephanie Jones being the one to hand those over through the subpoena. Brian Friedman going after Stephanie Jones, saying she resorted to her well-reported tactics and attempted to decimate her own client. He told one U.S. publication yesterday. That's the lawyer Brian Friedman. Jones is now suing Baldoni for allegedly breaching a contract to pay her $25,000 a month from May 2025 and claiming that Abel and Nathan orchestrated the smear campaign against Lively behind her back. A source says the people who say Blake Lively was the victim of a smear campaign are running one themselves. We have a great deal of evidence from emails and WhatsApp and other records which will show that this is the case. A source says. Unnamed sources just bug me. A representative for Jones told the Mail, for months, this group has gaslit and disparaged Stephanie Jones and her company for financial gain to settle personal scores and most recently to distract from their disgraceful smearing of Blake Lively. This lawsuit is a necessary step to stop defendants' continuing misconduct and for Stephanie Jones to recover the reputation she has worked decades to establish and which the defendants disparage their own nefarious purposes. So this is the Daily Mail article. Now let's look at Stephanie Jones's lawsuit against Justin Baldoni, which we just spoke of. So this is why everything kind of exploded the week after. This is from the Los Angeles Times. Justin Baldoni's ex-publicist sues over... is it not going to let me read this? I don't want to pay for the LA Times. Okay, I'm not paying for the LA Times. We're going to TMZ. Justin Baldoni, ex-publicist, sues his crisis PR team. They tried to take me down too. Justin's ex-publicist wants it known she was not part of the alleged plot to smear Blake Lively, and in fact, now she's suing the women Blake accused, claiming they tried to destroy her reputation too. Stephanie Jones is a big deal celeb publicist who reps folks like Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Venus Williams, and Baldoni, up until this year anyway. In the lawsuit she just filed, Jones says her ex-employee, Jennifer Abel, was assigned to handle Baldoni's publicity, and it was Abel's decision to hire Melissa Nathan, a crisis PR specialist, when the It Ends With Us feud started to erupt. That's why this came out on the December 24th, by the way. This is why this is so interesting, too, because you would think that Melissa Nathan, the decision to hire her, would have to be approved not only by Jennifer Abel, but by Stephanie Jones, who is the head of the company. But what do I know? Remember, as the TMZ verse reported, Jennifer and Melissa are the two publicists Blake is accusing of launching the smear campaign. Now, in the new docs obtained by TMZ, Stephanie says Jennifer and Melissa's real goal was tearing down Jones' reputation to take her clients and enrich themselves upon Abel's planned departure from Jones' PR firm. So this was Jennifer planned to leave and was going to take people with her, like Justin Baldoni. Her lawsuit includes alleged text messages between the women, one of which shows Melissa telling Jennifer, "I know, and once you are gone, we will be on accounts together and make really good money and be happy." So this is not stuff concluded in Blake Lively's. This is stuff in the Stephanie Jones lawsuit. More text messages revealed. In the suit, Stephanie stresses her ex-employer, Jennifer, didn't even like Baldoni. One alleged text she sent said, "I can't stand him. He's so pompous. You're not that important and nobody gives a shit how hard your life is." Oh my God. Even they all just eat each other alive. Jennifer also alleged texted that Baldoni needed to be taken down a notch. In projecting It Ends With Us might bomb at the box office, she wrote, quote, "He needs to be humbled. When this movie flops, he's going to try to blame every person around him for it." This is the people Justin Baldoni hired talking about him. But Stephanie claimed Jennifer and Melissa also had their knives out for her. In the suit, she says they worked media contacts to plant negative stories about her. Specifically, she cites one article headline, "Who's Afraid of Stephanie Jones?" There are other texts where Jennifer is clearly excited about the plan to screw her boss. For instance, she allegedly texted Melissa, "We are going to war. I feel so alive. Ha 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 ha." And Melissa replied, telling Jennifer she was leaving Stephanie's company with a bang. According to the suit, Stephanie discovered Jennifer's plot in August because she allegedly downloaded confidential company documents and fired her. So now she's saying Miss Abel downloaded confidential documents, and that's why she fired her. It appears Stephanie found all these text messages through a sweep of Jennifer's devices after she got canned. Devices that I believe were provided by this company. Stephanie is suing Justin, Jennifer, Melissa, and Justin's company, Wayfarer Studios, for defamation, breach of contract, and more. She wants the court to award unspecified damages she believes her company has suffered. Her lawyer, Kristen Toller, tells TMZ, for months, this group has gaslit, and this is what we read in the Daily Mail headline. Stephanie is suing simply to recover the reputation she has worked decades to establish. So do you see how this trickles down, this whole story? I'm waiting for them, like somebody to sue Sony now at some point. It's really, really, really fascinating. Okay, so as we start winding down, I know it's very sad. We're going to talk about some of the media support for Blake Lively, some social media posts that are out there right now, and then we'll call it a day. Oh, wait, here's some more fallout that I wanted to talk about. So Justin Baldoni has a podcast called Man Enough that is produced by Wayfarer Studios. Their podcast co-host, Liz Plank, announced her departure on December 23rd. She said she was stepping away from the show after actress Blake Lively accused the actor and director of sexual harassment in a smear campaign. Plank shared the news in a statement posted to her Instagram page on Monday. Quote, "Thank you for trusting me with your hearts and stories, for holding space for mine, and for making this show what it was. Thank you for being here, for trusting me, and for being by my side for the last 4 years. We all deserve better, and I know that together we can create it. More to share soon as I continue to process everything that has happened. In the meantime, I will continue to support everyone who called out injustice and holds the people standing in their way accountable." So she made the decision, which I'm sure we will hear more from Liz Plank, to remove herself from that podcast with Justin Baldoni. Now, another thing, and this is somebody that I follow on Instagram, I'm a fan of, and she's great. She's a podcast host and author, Elizabeth Day. She has a really great podcast called How to Fail. She is overseas, but I think a lot of people know her over here as well. She's insanely talented. She did a great interview with Andy Cohen when they did the Hey You Fest overseas last month. Was that in November? But she's great, and she's an author. I mean, just somebody that I really look up to. Well, she had a podcast episode with Justin Baldoni, and she has deleted the podcast from her podcast feed. She wrote on Instagram on Tuesday that she made the decision to remove the recent How to Fail interview with Justin Baldoni from all platforms while the distressing allegations made against him in Blake Lively's recent filing are fully investigated. Every individual has a right to a safe workplace. Every woman has the right to dignity in that workplace. Every form of abuse should be called out, and I salute the individuals who have the courage to do so. I reached out to Elizabeth Day just about an hour and a half ago on one of the mini breaks as I've been collecting information. She is in Egypt right now with really spotty Wi-Fi. Because my question to her in transparency was, when you released this and it got picked up by the press that this episode of Justin Baldoni was being removed, did you get overwhelmingly supportive praise for doing this, or was there a backlash against you doing this? Because we could then maybe tie in, was this a PR case? Like, I'm curious, was it overwhelmingly positive for Elizabeth Day for removing, or was there a lot of negative comments that you did this? Because if we're looking at PR, if we're removing ourselves from Baldoni Lively, but thinking about PR and crisis communications, I would suspect there would be a healthy amount of negativity for this move as well. And you're like, Ryan, that's shocking, all of this stuff. It's not shocking. This is what this whole 3-part series has been about, is perception and public perception and the way comments are seeded out there and trying to throw hate one way, look away from the other way. All of this stuff is really, really interesting, okay? So those are two things regarding podcasts that I thought was interesting. And now let's look at some of the online support that Blake Lively has been getting since all of this started just 8. So if I type into Google Blake Lively online support, and by the way, Dad, if you're listening, which I know you're probably not listening because I don't think you know how to work the podcasting app still, Google it's a great resource for how to find out things and figure out how to work the TV, Dad. So when I type this in, a bunch of articles come out. This is one from the Hollywood online forum, The Wrap. Blake Lively support stacks up. Gwyneth Paltrow, SAG-AFTRA, and more. We talked about Gwyneth Paltrow and SAG-AFTRA stepping up, right? Gwyneth Paltrow's statement says, in an Instagram post, Paltrow featured Blake Brown on her Christmas wish list, adding a queen emoji. Blake Brown is Blake Lively's hair care line, so that's considered support. Now, Brandon Sklenar, who is the other lead of It Ends With Us, showed his support Monday by encouraging the public to read Lively's complaint. Sklenar posted an Instagram story with a link to a New York Times article, the article that started it all, and said, I think it was something like he wrote, "My God, just read this." Michelle Maroney, the actor, Lively's co-star in A Simple Favor 2, which is not out yet. Simple Favor was a pretty great movie, actually. Shared a clip to his Instagram on Monday supporting the actress, saying he noted that his colleague was in pain after filming the rom-com. So she's saying, I saw Blake Lively, after all this happened, in pain shooting this movie. Now, Sean Levy, the Deadpool and Wolverine director and godfather to Lively's son, Olin, also posted the Times article on his Instagram story, writing that he is proud to call her a friend. Robyn Lively, Blake Lively's sister, and also the amazing actor from Teen Witch, shared a long thread of screenshots from the Times article along with the words of support, writing, "Finally, justice for my sister." Robyn said her sister is one of the kindest, most honest and loving humans I know. Blake isn't a villain. She's a mama bear to her core, a loving and supportive wife, a sister, a friend, and someone who worked her ass off on a film in abominable working conditions. Amber Heard said, "A lie travels halfway around the world before truth can get its boots on. I saw this firsthand and up close. It is as horrifying as it is destructive." We've always talked about that concept over the last couple of years on this show, mainly in regards to Bravo, saying, you know, I would see social media things. I always used an example of like the Housewives Aspen trip when it was put out that like Erica Jane and Dorit left early. It was all the Kathy Hilton, Lisa Rinna season. Remember that the Aspen trip, the Kimosabe having a huge year, that hat store, by the way. But I was saying it was incorrect information. But when they put out the next post saying, oh, this was actually incorrect, the first post with the incorrect information got tons of likes, got tons of shares. The post saying that it was wrong got a fraction of that. So you had all of these people out there that never seen the second post just believing that and spreading that, right? That's a really bad example, but it just kind of shows you that those things, even if they're not meaning to lie or put out false information, it still travels so much further, and the retraction is never paid attention to. Now, her stars of the movie The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, America Ferrara, Amber Tamblyn, and Alexis Bledel, the co-stars on the 2005 film, put out a joint Instagram statement. The sisterhood, the Traveling Pants sisterhood, came together. Wrote, "We stand with her in solidarity as she fights back against the reported campaign waged to destroy her reputation." Colleen Hoover, the author of this book, which this all started with, wrote on Instagram saying, "Never change, never wilt." She also screenshotted the statement from Ferrara, Tamblyn, and Bledel expressing that their message gave her the courage to speak out. She wrote, "I wanted to show support, but I had anxiety thinking of putting my post about Blake in my feed and sending myself into a mental spiral from the inevitable comments. But this statement from these women and Blake's ability to refuse to sit down and be buried has been nothing short of inspiring." So it's Colleen Hoover, the author. But also Colleen Hoover pointing out something that I, on a very tiny scale, deal with. You know, is that knowing you're putting something out, even if it's a stupid meme, you have to then deal with hate. You have to deal with in fact, I just, a couple hours ago when I was taking another one of my breaks, I deserve a break. I had posted a picture of Shannon Bedore and me after the Jeff Lewis live show. And I talked about how good the experience was doing the Jeff Lewis live show. And I got to meet Shannon and I was all excited and hyped up. And, you know, I was just so happy about the whole thing. Somebody just wrote a comment a couple hours ago and wrote, "When you sell your soul to the devil, you look like him." Talking about me. I mean, it's laughable when I talk to you guys, but that leaves a psychic scar, man. That hurts. It hurts. And that's what it's meant to do. It's meant to hurt you. And so I'm guessing this is somebody that doesn't like me or doesn't like Jeff Lewis and go, "You sold your soul to the devil because you work with that man, Jeff Lewis." Think about what it takes to leave that. Like, think about the mental gymnastics you have to do for a positive post, not talking about anything except what a positive experience something was, saying, "This is what you look like when you sell your soul to the devil." And all I have to say to that is, "Hail Satan." No, but like, seriously, this shit, you have to, I mean, that's the bad part of any of this. And I'm tiny in terms of any sort of awareness of who I am or what I do, but still I get that shit. I mean, think about what that takes. Amy Schumer wrote, I believe Blake. She wrote on her Instagram story. Paul Feig, the director of A Simple Favor and A Simple Favor 2, posted his support for Blake Lively on Twitter, writing, I've now made 2 movies with Blake, and all I can say is she's one of the most professional, creative, collaborative, talented, and kind people I've ever worked with. She truly did not deserve any of this smear campaign against her. Paul Feig, the iconic director, started off with Freaks and Geeks, that iconic series with him and Judd Apatow, and of course, the director of Bridesmaids, one of the best comedic movies of all time. Okay, so we are nearing the end. Don't get sad. But I wanted to read some YouTube comments that I got after posting the first of this series, of this 3-part series. And I thought this was really great. And somebody was like, I said, can I read this comment on my pod? And they said, oh, as long as you're not going to be completely negative to me. And I was like, no, I like differing opinions. Like there's nothing bad about differing opinions. And I think that it helps also show what's in other people's minds. I'm just one person. These are just my thoughts, but also these are my thoughts reading all of these articles. This person writes, one of the reasons this probably won't go to trial is because her complaint does not contain enough legal elements to make a legal case yet. It was a good PR move by Blake Lively, a list of complaints that gullible people will just take as fact. The alleged behaviors have no context or explanation provided. The text messages used by the New York Times were edited and out of context. So we've talked about this at the beginning of this, but this is somebody, before I'm doing this episode, wrote this last night. The context, scenario planning is critical here. But in the social media age and in America, Blake Lively's team knows people won't question things, be skeptical, educate themselves on the law, or question sources like the New York Times and their unethical journalistic narratives. Once the gold standard, the New York Times, they became a tabloid-esque in the last 5 to 7 years with only the legacy of their once great name to cling to life. I guess Americans don't understand the principle of due process, what that means, but it doesn't apply anyway because most of the rush to judge unquestioning social media consumers don't understand that she has not filed to sue, not enough legal elements. But we've talked about that. This was just the opening. This was just maybe. There's a lawsuit coming maybe. All I can say is that Blake Lively better be sure this isn't going to backfire on her again because his lawyer is suing, and that means there will be a discovery process. Justin Baldoni's lawyer is no slouch and has already hinted at the major legal issues here. That's Brian Friedman. We've talked about this. Willing to bet Blake Lively will not go through with that. So they're saying this could be put to an end because Blake Lively will not want to go through the discovery process on her end. Seems to have a good channel here. Very surprised to hear such a gullible take on why an abused star and her very wealthy, influential husband would go along with the marketing the movie his abused wife endured. She had no time to talk about vulnerable women in a domestic violence situation. Only when she got called out did she make slight reference to it, but yet would like us to believe she is a victim of harassment. But first, I will market my hair and booze and husband's movie in my dazzling clothes. There's money to be made before I fight for justice. Sorry, there are just too many holes in all of this person writes. I think I took a little shrapnel at the end of seems to be a good podcast, but I can't believe you're going along. Thank you. But I think that's an interesting thing to read. So, also that question of these two powerhouses, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, you have to believe the story that they're selling. But the thing I keep coming back to is that living through and watching that backlash, we really didn't question that Blake Lively was a horrible person. And we saw the handful of video clips and we were kind of just on board with it. But it makes a lot more sense just because I see how all these other stories are sprouted out into the ether, into the social media ether, that it does make a lot of sense that they were harnessing this negative energy and making it explode further and further. And I really do think that's how social media works. And, this isn't the podcast for this, but just look at the 2024 campaign for president. Look at that. But it's all PR. There was another great comment that I responded back to. And this is kind of negative towards me, which is totally fine. Oh, did she delete it? Oh no. I hope she didn't delete it. Looks like she might have. One sec. Well, dang it. It looks like she deleted the comment, which I thought was actually well written. And, I thought, but it was definitely more pro Justin Baldoni and negative Blake Lively, but I thought it was well written. And I responded back to it saying, well, wait for the third part where I talk more about the cherry picking of the text messages and what Baldoni's up to and what could potentially happen. But it looks like she deleted the comment, which sucks because I didn't take offense to it. And I wanted to read that to you guys to try to present what other people are thinking out there. So that brings us, I think, to the end until the next thing. But I'm going to be out this next week. So hang on to your hats, folks. This is going to get even bumpier, it looks like, unless some kind of backroom deal is made before then to just lie low, which I think there is no possible way of that happening. Just remember, what you read, what you see, what you hear is all PR for the most part. And it's really up to all of us to try to read everything or try to listen to things that can provide more context. This is still a little confusing, but I'm going to be interested to read all of Brian Friedman's complaint on behalf of Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer. And I just want to remind people once again, and I know some people hate when I do this, but remember that most people, they do tend to hate on women more than men. And I know I know you could probably give me 88 billion examples of, no, what about this person? What about this person? I just see this a lot myself. Like I just see this a lot myself. And I just think that's important to just acknowledge. And how we started this, it doesn't mean Blake Lively is potentially not sometimes difficult to work with. But what they're alleging, like, that does not also, like, it sucks. I mean, it would be great if we all worked with really, really nice, amazing people. The entertainment industry is not filled with them. There's a lot of great people out there, but it's not filled with them and it's not a requirement. But a lot of these things, which she initially said before the WGA strike, is that she was uncomfortable with all of these things. There was the 30-point plan agreed to by Wayfarer Studios and Blake Lively to come back to work after the Writers Guild strike to speak about this movie. And also, Blake Lively was the one that didn't say a thing about Justin Baldoni. Now, if they can prove that she was doing some behind-the-scenes smear campaign against him at the same time, that's fine. But there definitely was this campaign, and maybe it was all completely organic. But maybe she lit the match. But I don't know. It just feels like when you're hiring crisis communication people, PR people, sometimes they luck out, but a lot of the times they really help with things. And the one thing we do know is that they did help snuff out negative stories about Justin Baldoni. Aside from anything Blake Lively, they were snuffing out negative stories. So think about all of these things. We are imperfect as people and as humans. But I think this was just a fascinating peek behind the curtain of how things really operate. And sad, once again, the actual issue of DV is now completely, for the most part, out of the conversation. And now the fascinating part of this movie is the behind the scenes instead of the movie itself. And maybe while I'm recovering this week, I will finally watch It Ends With Us, because I'm part of the problem. I didn't even watch the movie. I didn't read the book. But you know what? I should. And I will. And maybe I'll have more. Maybe I'll do a 2-hour recap of It Ends With Us, which I don't think I would do. I always hate saying goodbye. Guys, remember, Monday, Sophie Ross is back to the pod. Pop Culture Roundup on Monday. I'll have an interview on Tuesday that I recorded a couple weeks ago. And then I should be out for the rest of the week. Wish me luck. Surgery's around 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Say a little prayer or whatever you believe. Pour one out. Hope I don't die on the table, as one DM told me I potentially would. Talk about that, really did raise my blood pressure. And if you like this podcast, consider leaving it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you hate this podcast, what are you still doing here? There are so many better things out there that you'll love. I know it. I hope you're having the best Sunday ever. And wow, finishing 2024 off strong. Bye, guys.